It, as I just said, we're going to record it for folks to see later. And a great big welcome today. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited. Lisa Cataline, our Justice and Peace Coordinator for the Federation, will be giving an update on some exciting legislation. And we'll get started with her right after we open up with prayer, as we always do. And just a reminder to remain muted as we start. There will be time for questions later, and Lisa will walk you through all of that. Got to make my screen bigger so I can see this. Our opening prayer. Stimulated by the Holy Spirit of love and receptive to the Spirit's inspirations, we move always towards profound love of God and love of neighbor without distinction, from whom we do not separate ourselves, and for whom, in the following of Christ, we work in order to achieve unity of neighbor with neighbor and neighbor with God. In humility, the Spirit of the incarnate Word. In sincere charity, the manner of St. Joseph, whose name we bear. In an Ignatian Salesian climate that is, with an orientation towards excellence, tempered by gentleness, peace, and joy. We always like to share a maxim. This time is Maxim 30, and this is a translation from Marcia Allen. And do the same in the practice of hope. When in your actions and plans there's little likelihood of success of human aid, and more difficulties oppose you, trust in God far more. And then we always like to share a high school student's translation, which I think Sister Susan Wilcox did, and I think she's on the call here today. When someone tells you can't be done, prove them wrong. All right, Lisa, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, everyone. I actually want to keep up this maxim for a moment. As Kristen mentioned, my name is Lisa. For those of you who I haven't met yet virtually or in person, I serve as the Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Coordinator here at the Federation, and I work remotely with some in-person engagement based in Wisconsin on traditional Potawatomi lands and Ho-Chunk lands. One of the reasons I wanted to share this maxim is this phrase, the practice of hope. And when there seems like there's little likelihood of success. If you've been living in the United States in the past few months or the past few years or decades, you know that sometimes it's hard to hold out hope for any positive social change, sometimes at the legislative level. So I wanted today, I'm going to share a few things about what's going on in our justice office, and hopefully we can say that it can be done. So what's new? As a reminder, I've been in this role for about 2.5 years, and one of the primary pieces of this role is to really help our Federation engage at a national level and at the federal level in terms of legislative advocacy. So I'll highlight that in a moment, but first I want to emphasize a few things that I'll be up to in the coming weeks, and I ask for your prayers for them. So the first is next week, I will be headed to Washington, D.C. as a young adult participant in a conference that is hosted by Leadership Roundtable, which is an organization based in Washington, D.C. And they are hosting their regularly scheduled summit with the theme of young adult leadership and co-responsibility in the Catholic Church. If you may recall that both Kasia Sainer, who works for the Congregation of St. Joseph, and myself participated and bore witness to the Synod on Synodality in Rome in October. So in many ways, this feels like a continuation of that work. I look forward to meeting with people across the country, bishops, cardinals, folks in parishes, people working in other national organizations, and really grappling with this theme of young adult leadership, not just as kind of add-ons to church engagement or to the work of justice, but as primary protagonists in that work. The second piece that is coming up in a little under a month is an annual gathering of justice promoters and justice folks. This year, we're going to be gathering in Queens, New York, and our focus is on integral ecology and synodality. Several participants will attend the Commission on the Status of Women, They've received UN badges as part of our UN NGO. And one thing I'm really excited about, first of all, this is really the first time we've gathered as a group of folks from across the country. And there are several newer faces to those justice roles. And so I'm excited to connect in person. We'll also have an opportunity for an immersion of sorts. We'll be spending some time with the Shinnecock kelp farmers and learning more about the ministries on the Brentwood campus on Long Island. And much of this, while we know that many of our congregations are not necessarily based next to water or have property next to water, what matters is it's really going to, I think, inspire us together to consider what is land justice and what is the practice of integral ecology look like in our context. So I'm really looking forward to that collective work. So just wanted to give a few highlights of what I'm up to. Okay, as I mentioned, one of my jobs is to be a point person for federal level happenings. I want to highlight two kind of groups that I'm a part of, and then I'll go a little bit more into some bills that are in Congress right now that could use our collective voice. First, many of you might have already signed up for Network's call that's actually this evening, and they're going to be launching more of their election engagement work this spring. So even if you can't attend that live, I encourage folks to sign up for it. Again, that's tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. They're going to be offering ways to engage with the election throughout the months of March, April, and May. So stay tuned for those opportunities. We'll be sure to promote them. The second is that I serve in a number of coalitions, one including Nuns Against Gun Violence. This coalition is fairly new, emerged in the past year. Excuse me. And it's really a way for us as collective, those who work for vowed religious communities, to act on behalf of common gun sense reform and to really end gun violence in this country, which is an epidemic. That coalition is really energetic, and there's been some really beautiful actions that have happened across the country. And so you'll continue to see more from me and hear more from me in those spaces. The other thing that is a little bit newer for me is engaging with the Washington interreligious groups. Now, some of those groups are based in DC, and to be a member, you have to physically have an office in DC, so I'm not part of those, but many of the working groups themselves meet digitally, which is great. So for the past several months, I've attended regular convenings around extractivism and mining industry. And I've more recently been added to a few other groups. So I look forward to really connecting with other religious partners, whether they're of a Christian denomination or another faith tradition. And I think that will continue to be really fruitful in terms of work across geographies and across contexts. Okay, there's two pieces of legislation I want to share a little bit more about with you today. And some of them, one you are probably more familiar with, the other one is pretty new. So everyone get excited and get ready to talk about legislation. The first is the child tax credit. Now, you've probably heard about this first in the context of the American Rescue Plan, which came in the months and year after COVID, that really helped reduce child poverty tremendously. That tax credit expired. And this is the replacement. Now, this is not as robust as that, but it does do a lot of good. So on the House side, was called HR 7024. It was a bipartisan piece of legislation, and it did pass the House at the end of January. So that's good news. However, we know, according to the Schoolhouse Rock, for a bill to become a law, it has to pass both chambers of Congress. So it's currently on the Senate side. And the other thing I want to note too that is looming over all of this is that the Senate is on recess until Friday, which means they might be in district, engaging with their constituents. Many of them will be traveling, I'm sure, back to DC in the next day or two. And there's a big focus and concern about a potential government shutdown or partial government shutdown on March 1st. Many advocates have really emphasized this might be our only shot, our only opportunity to really get the bipartisan supported child tax credit passed this session. And I want to highlight a few things of why it really matters. One, it would include nearly 16 million kids. And I know that throughout the years, many of our ministries across the United States have worked with kids who are living in poverty, experiencing poverty, and this would really help lift the boat for those folks. An estimated 1 in 5 children in this country would benefit. So the message here is that we need to contact, and whether via phone or via email, our senators and encourage them to pass the expanded child tax credit bill from the House. And the other thing I want to highlight too is that this tax credit is really supported by a wide coalition of groups. Everyone from Network, United Way, the U.S. Conference of Bishops, Coalition on Human Needs. It's very much has received a lot of support across the spectrum. And I'm going to offer a few slides of just a little bit more context of what this could do from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which is a nonpartisan group that I regularly use for resources. So first, this tax credit proposal would really meaningfully reduce child poverty. It would lift as many as 400,000 kids and boost support for 3 million more kids and families with incomes below the poverty line. And I think that number almost feels like it's unconscionable that we have kids that are living in poverty, that we have anyone living in poverty in this country, right? This is a preventable reality. And so this is one meaningful step in doing that. The other piece I want to highlight on the bipartisan child tax credit expansion is that it benefits millions of workers and their families. What I appreciate about this is that we interact with workers from all sectors of life in our daily lives, whether it's someone caring for, like as a certified nursing health assistant, whether it's a cashier or a janitor. These are folks that are part of our communities, and we might be part of those communities ourselves or our family members. And I just think like the wide swath of that cannot be overstated. So I'm going to encourage folks to contact their senators. Again, remember, this is already passed in the House. Contact your senators, and this is a must-pass piece of legislation. Right now, Kristen is going to drop in the chat a link to take some e-advocacy on this. And this comes from the folks at Network. So even if you just can't remember where this link is, you can search Network Catholic Social Justice Lobby and go to their advocacy center. And this is one of their main alerts that you can send. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit from tax policy to a trade policy. And this is one piece I'm really excited about. Okay, the Forest Act. This was introduced. It was introduced in the previous Congress, and then nothing happened. And then it was introduced again in November 2023, so just a few months ago. One thing I want to highlight is that it's a bipartisan piece of legislation, which is remarkable in these times. The 2 primary co-sponsors of this on the Senate side are Senator Braun, who's a Republican from Indiana, and Senator Schatz, who's a Democrat from Hawaii. One of the things I want to mention on this, and I apologize, I don't know the order of sisters who really advocated and worked with Senator Braun's office, but I know the impact of Catholic advocates was really felt in the state of Indiana and on Senator Braun's office to encourage him to help introduce and co-sponsor this. So again, our calls, our engagement really matter, and that's really exciting. So the Forest Act stands for the Fostering Overseas Rule of Law and Environmentally Sound Trade Act, which is a very complicated title. And so that's why we shortened it to the Forest Act. And basically, this piece of legislation would require companies to really meaningfully trace where their products have come from and to confirm if they are produced legally or not. If they're produced illegally, they would not be allowed to be imported. I think the other piece of this is, as advocates are really championing this Forest Act, and I'll talk about who supported that in a moment, they're really looking to build a list of co-sponsors of this bill, especially among Republican offices. So again, this is maybe not as well known. You may have not heard about it yet, but it is an important piece, and here's why. So we know that of the realities of illegal deforestation across the globe. And this has really critical impacts of peoples, especially indigenous peoples, of our planet as a whole, and of the destruction of ecosystems that are so, so precious. To kind of put this in a little bit of context, in just 2022 alone, an area bigger than the state of West Virginia was lost. Other thing to note about forests is that they both absorb and store carbon dioxide, which is really helpful as our planet continues to warm. Okay, so what does this bill do? First, to note that there are many, many organizations, private, public sector, secular, religious entities that are supportive of the Forest Act. Nearly 100 religious entities have signed on in support of the Forest Act. And this bill really follows some of the work that has come out of the European Union and other countries that really emphasize limiting illegal deforestation. This bill helps promote good governance and transparency across global supply chains while also tackling deforestation. Forests act as our lungs, and they also impact and are really central to the realities of indigenous communities and those who really experience the direct impacts of the climate crisis. This bill would also help stop agricultural products that are from illegally deforested lands from entering the United States. And a lot of those agricultural products include palm oil, soy, and beef. The other thing I want to note about this is sometimes when we hear about a climate bill or like acting on behalf of the climate for and care for our common home, I, for one, don't always think about trade. However, this can really have, I think, an important impact because it both impacts agricultural producers in the United States as well as those abroad, and really encourages tackling of corruption and other international financial crimes. The World Wildlife Fund has been a huge backer of the Forest Act, and so I think if they're willing to put their name behind this, then I think we are too. Okay. So what I'm going to encourage and share in the next piece, and I'll stop for any questions about the Forest Act, child tax credit, or anything else I'm up to. In a moment, I'm going to share on the screen just like a sample script of how you might be encouraged to call in. I'm also going to invite Kristen to drop in the chat a link to do e-advocacy for the Forest Act. This comes from our partners, the Sisters of Mercy. And so I encourage you to submit those, and I encourage you to contact both of your senators and your US representative because they're just looking for co-sponsors all around. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through this script, which may be familiar to you if you have done call-ins before, but it's always nice to have it. I do have on the screen the switchboard number, so if you do not know the number of your office, you can say your zip code and talk to the operator, and you can be connected with them. That switchboard number is 202-224-3121. Now, the big thing about making a call to your office is that you want to kind of give yourself your credibility, so your name and where you are a constituent, and to really encourage them to co-sponsor the Forest Act of 2023. I think the other piece of this is that every congressperson has received a letter that shows all the religious organizations that support this act. And I think too, if you ever want to include a message or wording about your care for our common home, or you really care deeply about protecting indigenous communities' livelihoods, or you want to make sure that we're not creating more deforestation, you can name that as well. So this is a helpful script, I think. Fairly simple. The main thing is you just want to emphasize what bill it is, why you care, and who you are. So with that, I'm going to pause. We've just hopefully engaged a little bit. I encourage you to plan a time to do this call. Later today, I am sending a constant contact email which sometimes can go to junk or to your like promotions or updates tab in your email, that's going to give the same information again. It's going to give the script. It's going to give the links to how to do the e-advocacy. It's going to give some more background information on the Forest Act. So even if you don't remember all this today, that's okay. Since we're recording this, we'll have this on our YouTube page pretty shortly after, so we can share it with folks. And just to encourage folks to continue to call in the next week or two. So that's what I have for now. I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions, and stop the share for now. Any questions? It's okay if there's not. Just by show of hands, has anyone heard of the Forest before this? Okay, so I see 3 hands. Okay, great. So one thing I think that's important is just to help communicate that to your whether you're living in intentional community or living in a retirement home, or you have a family member, just to encourage them and say, hey, I know this bill has been introduced. Do you want to hear more about it? Things like that. I think that's a powerful way to invite like 1 or 2 other friends or family members to participate in this call in action. So yeah, any other questions, thoughts? Otherwise, I'll pass it back to Kristen, who will give a review of what we'll be up to in the next few months with the Dear Neighbor series.
Okay. Lisa, do you want to pop the slide back up?
Yep.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We have some exciting Dear Neighbor series coming up that I think we definitely hope you all can join us for. So our next one is going to be March 20th, and we're going to be talking about the 375th anniversary of the Sisters of St. Joseph. 2025 is going to be a big year for all of us, and we're planning on marking that occasion in a variety of ways here at the Federation and beyond. And we'll also talk about the celebration that we will be having in 2025, which will be a gathering for all of us, similar to Event 2022, but with a little bit of a rebrand. So we'll talk more about that next month. And then in April, we are going to be changing a little bit the landscape of our leadership council, which we had folks on in December to talk about our leadership council, which is essentially our board of directors for the Federation. And we are expanding that board to include our lay members. So we're very excited about that. And we want to take the time to really emphasize why we're doing that, how that's going to look, and how people can be a part of it, because we want to make sure that folks who are interested in joining and shaping the future and direction of the Federation have the option to do that. So we'll be opening up our process shortly after that in April. And then in May, we are going to be having our agrégés present. So for some, that might be a little bit of a new term. Maybe your congregation has them, maybe they don't. So you can learn about that and what the offerings are for agrégés across the US. We did something similar last month with our associates. Andrea Pearson Tandy talked about it, and we had a lot of interest come in after that, which is really exciting. So we're using these as opportunities to share the good work of our congregations. Well, on that note, that's all I have for our upcoming Dear Neighbor series. We pretty much have the rest of the year planned out, which is really exciting. So again, thank you for everyone for joining us. I know I see some faces on here who have joined us every Wednesday for the past year. And so thank you for being a part of this. We can't do this without you. If you want to come off mute, you can. I am going to stop the recording.